Grammy-nominated American composer Missy Mazzoli has been deemed Brooklyn's post-millennial Mozart by Time Out New York. Her boundary-defying works have been performed by ensembles all over the world, and in 2018, she became one of the first 2 women to receive a commission from the Metropolitan Opera, a distinction she does not take lightly.
People always ask me, like, oh, how does it feel to be one of the first women commissioned at the Met? It's the thing I'm most proud of in life, and it's a literal dream come true, but it only feels good if I'm not the last woman.
You're listening to Speaking Soundly, a backstage pass to today's biggest stars of the music world. I'm your host, David Krauss, principal trumpet of the Metropolitan Opera. During each episode, you'll hear me speak with inspiring performers about their creative process and the personal journey that led them to the stage. When you're composing, is it a thunderbolt of creativity? And what happens if you're on the subway and you get an idea? Do you scramble for your phone and write yourself a note right away?
Yeah, it's funny because I had friends over for dinner last night and we were playing this party game where you go onto your phone and you just randomly read a note to yourself out of context, and they're writers. And so all of our notes to ourselves were hilarious. It was like, faster melody, ? Chicago, or not, maybe folk reference. It's like all these like fragments of ideas, and theirs were even funnier. It was like barbecue attended by pigs, all this like just random ideas for stories. So yeah, sure. Like sometimes an idea will come to me like that. And I try to write every day so that my brain, even when I'm not sitting at my desk and not sitting at the piano, that my brain is doing some of the work for me. So that means, yeah, sure. I'll be sitting on the subway and my brain will like solve a problem in the piece and then I'll write it down. But that's like rare, I have to admit. I mean, most of the time I have this set amount of time that I'm sitting at my desk, that I'm writing. And again, it is a switch that I'm turning on and off. And it's exhausting. It's exhausting to sit here. I'm working on this opera for the Met right now, and I am so tired, and my hair looks crazy, and I'm wearing a sweatsuit, and like, it's so exhausting. So you need to, I will speak for myself. I need to be able to step away from it and get my brain out of it as well.
And what happens if you sit down to write and nothing comes out? I mean, is writer's block a thing?
Yeah, wow. It really varies and it's still very mysterious. I used to struggle a lot with writer's block, but now I've developed strategies to get around it and to like work myself free of it.
How exactly? How do you escape that?
Well, one thing is just, skipping ahead to another point in the piece, and so you're not writing, not trying to think of what comes next, but to like, just, okay, what's going to happen a minute later or 10 minutes later. Another thing is to go back and revise something that you've already written or an earlier part of the piece, and just to get yourself started. And I have things that I say to myself, like, I think a good question to ask yourself when you're really stuck is like, what is the simplest thing I could do here? And not that you're necessarily going to do that, but like just to know that like sometimes a simple solution is all you need. And even just to know what that looks like what will usually set you free. And they're like, this is one version of something I could do, or I could do something better. So it's things like that. It's a combination of strategies and then like mantras that like kind of reorient your way of thinking in that moment.
And when it's working for you and you're writing, how much of that process is just creativity and waiting for inspiration? And how much of it is just working on the math, figuring out the structure and the problems inherent to that particular piece?
It's hard to say like how much is one thing or the other because it's all part of the same process for me. Like I feel like it is personal. It's like my brain works in like a very mathematical way, and I can be at my most creative and my most insane and daring when I'm working with numbers and like with a structure that I've built that makes sense to me. And that always sounds kind of boring, but it really is a way for me to set myself free, and to not repeat myself, which is very important to me. So I'm constantly going back and forth. I feel like I need to be able to conceive of a piece or a section of a piece in one burst, one thought. And sometimes I'll write it out on like one piece of paper or something. And then it's about refining and refining and making more details.
Mhm. I've been fortunate to play a lot of contemporary music written by a diverse group of composers, yet still, when I think about who a composer is, I'm envisioning Mozart or Beethoven. I'm not proud of that, but those are the images that pop into my head. Is it hard that these archetypes still come to mind, and did it make it difficult for you to envision being a composer?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, and that was a huge hurdle to get over early in my life. Because you don't it's not just that most composers are that you encounter are male, or most composers are dead, or most composers are white. It's like that they all are. And when we talk about representation, the first hurdle is just having anyone who is not that, having people of color, having women, having non-binary people who are just visible at all. And I think for young people, you have to see it in order to imagine yourself going in that direction. It's that simple. I think that the idea of having a role model and a mentor is extremely important, and not just important, but necessary in order to be able to envision yourself pursuing a career. And I struggled a lot before I met people like Meredith Monk, Julia Wolfe, Tanya Leone. These were our women who shared some of my experience just by virtue of being women in the world, and were having these amazing careers as composers. And so it wasn't until I met them that I really felt like I had a future in this industry. And I think we need to get out of this idea that that is what a composer looks like, because it's not an old idea. It's not an idea that is going away as quickly as it needs to. Still, when you look at the people who are getting most of the big awards and funding and the big commissions, I mean, they still look like that idea. They're not dead, but like like that they're the people, they look like are a very old-fashioned idea of a composer. So, and that they're white men. So, and very deserving white men, but when it's all that, it's a problem, and it's not reflecting what our society actually looks like. So, I think that a lot of my work and my activism in music has been centered around providing mentorship for young female and non-binary and gender nonconforming composers, and also finding them when they're really young and are in their teens and are looking for that kind of role model.
Well, you've become such an amazing role model to so many young composers. Where do you find the time and the inspiration to advocate for others?
To me, it's not optional. Like it's essential. Like my success as a composer only makes sense to me if the next generation suffers a little less. And so all these successes that we have, we can open the door and bring in a little army of young female and non-binary composers who can be the next ones in line for those opportunities. People always ask me like, oh, how does it feel to be one of the first women commissioned at the Met? And it's like the thing I'm most proud of in life, and it's a literal dream come true, but it only feels good if I'm not the last woman. If there's like a steady stream of new commissions for women from here on out. So how do we make that happen? And for me, the answer is to provide mentorship and to provide resources for young women when they're at the age when you decide to become a professional musician, which for all of us is like in our teens at the latest. Like in order to have a shot, I'm not saying this is the way it should be, but the way it is in America and in the world, it's like to have a shot at being a professional, you have to start super young. So I wanted to catch them at that age.
When you were in school training to be a composer, you were in classes at Boston University and at Yale, both with very small percentage female composers in the class. Did you think at the time that this would be different when you got out in the real world and this was just like a college thing?
No. Because like I was paying attention to the programming at the New York Phil and the Boston Symphony, and then, like all over the world, and women were woefully underrepresented. So I saw it as a systemic problem. And I think that the problem, in school was that like, I didn't see enough people taking responsibility for looking at the system and figuring out where it breaks down for people who are not white men. Is it that women and people of color aren't applying to study composition at Yale or something? Or is it that they're applying and not getting in? If they're not applying, like that's really disturbing to me too. And so how can we change the process to be more inviting? But the answer was always like, oh, well, we can't accept more women because they just don't apply. And it's like, doesn't that make you upset that something in your program is unwelcoming to 51% of the population? Like I just, so I don't, it didn't seem like a localized problem. It felt like something systemic that I was going to have to deal with for the rest of my life, but I felt uniquely empowered to deal with it, having lived through and having lived through this shift of Me Too, and where there was finally a platform and a language with which to describe these issues.
And do you think the landscape has changed?
Sure. But like, until administrations are more diverse, like we're not going to see a big shift in programming, until
Right.
there are women and people of color at the helm, or in places of great power and curatorial power. Then I don't think that we're not going to see a huge shift. But yes, I also want to applaud these organizations that I love who are really making progress. I'm just very impatient and I want everything to happen now. I want everything to change a lot. So it's never going to move fast enough for me. But yes, things are changing. Yes, not fast enough for me, but I don't think it'll ever move fast enough for me.
You're from a small town in Pennsylvania, and neither of your parents were musicians. How did you even get the idea that composing was a thing that you could do?
I mean, my parents had a piano in our house. They got it at a flea market, and I just loved it. So we got that when I was 7, and I just fell in love with it. And I started writing music right away. And I knew that music was going to be my life. I just was in love with classical music, and I don't know where that came from at all. But I would just listen to it on the radio and play as much of it as I could, and I was like, this is going to be my life. But okay, I'm not going to be a pianist. And I have all these other interests too. Like even at a young age, I was really interested in all these other things. So composing sort of checks all those boxes, and then it allows you to do all sorts of stuff under the umbrella of being a composer.
What age are we talking about?
Like I decided I was going to be a composer when I was about 10. Yeah, because I love the music. No, I just love the music, and I was like, okay, whatever Beethoven's job was, I want to do that. And my piano teacher was like, these are composers. This is what they do. They write music. And I was like, that's what I want to do. And I just became really fixated. But like I said, I was crazy. Like I was really like a single-minded, sort of fixated, obsessive kid, which is not always fun, but led to a career doing this very niche, obsessive thing. And I was just like, this is what I'm going to do.
So you started really young, but was there a point where you got really serious about it?
I was always really serious about it. I was always like, I would make records, like there were cassette tapes, I would like make albums of my music and all piano stuff that I would play, and I would get people to record it. Like I was very, very serious about it. And yeah, it's funny because people always ask me like, don't you ever just write stuff for fun? I'm like, well, everything I write is fun. It's always fun. This job is extremely fun when I'm able to just spend time writing. I don't think like sitting down and being like, I'm going to write an opera or I'm going to write an orchestra piece is less fun than just like noodling around on the piano.
Right. I'm curious, when you compose a piece, it's a permanent artifact of that time. Do you ever look back on the style of your early works with the same kind of dread one might feel when they come across an old picture of themselves like wearing acid wash jeans from the 90s?
Well, okay, acid wash jeans are totally back in style. So, yeah. So I feel like I'm writing one big piece. I feel like every piece pushes me into the next piece. So even in those early pieces, I can see the seeds of what I'm writing now. And whether it's like an obsession with a certain kind of harmony or rhythm or a certain kind of texture or experimentation in one direction or the other. And so I don't feel like I've really changed my style, even from when I was a kid. Like it's just an evolution. Now someone hearing the music would definitely think that I have, but I think that at its core, I've been kind of on one journey. So it doesn't, there's stuff that I wouldn't there's not a lot of stuff from the early years that gets programmed, but it's still close to my heart.
And during this evolution, was your style always ever present, or was there a period when you struggled to find your voice?
Yeah, I think early on everyone struggles, and I still have days when I feel like I don't remember how music goes. And and I call my friend Bill Bertel, who's a great composer, and I'm like, okay, I forget how music goes. He's like, okay, me too. Let's talk about it, And so, um, but there's days when it's like things don't work, and I'll play notes that I think should go together, and I'm just like, why isn't this working? I don't understand. And but yeah, but in general, like I feel, um, I know what I like and the kind of music that I like, and I'm less sort of worried about other people liking it. I'm able now at the age of 41 to like write what's in my heart and to write what I feel is true, and to just trust that someone out there will find something in it if I'm just honest with myself.
Does the process of composing force you to be introspective so much so that it's almost like a form of therapy?
Yeah. I was just talking to my boyfriend the other day about how um I was just in Oslo doing this opera, and so we're in rehearsals all 10 hours a day, and there's no time to really write. And by the time I got back, I was really almost depressed. I was just like, I need to be writing something. And as soon as I started working on the Met Opera again, I was like, oh, I feel like I've straightened myself out. Like I feel much calmer, and I'm able to process the data of the world when I'm writing. And I've always felt that way. I think that there's something therapeutic about it being the same sort of process that I experienced when I was a kid. So like sitting down, like I'm have my piano here and like my desk here, and like it's literally the same setup that I had when I was writing music when I was 10. And there's something very calming and affirming about just kind of going back to the same thing every day. And I'm sure for you, it's a similar thing. Like when you practice, you've been doing this like probably every day your whole life for most of your life. And there's something in me that needs to make stuff. I need to be creating things. So if I'm not doing that, I feel it feels wrong. It almost feels like time is not passing at the appropriate rate. It just feel I feel like stuffed up. And I've heard people describe this before. I mean, even Bjork says like when she has a day where she's not writing music, she goes a little bit funny. It is a very Bjork way to describe it. And I'm like, I heard her say that. I was like, I totally know what you mean. That's the best reasoning for writing every day. It's just for me, it's just to like feel like myself.
Well, you're a very busy composer, but you're also a performer, and you founded Victoire, which is an electroacoustic band. Did a lot of thought go into calling it a band instead of an ensemble? Is there a difference?
Well, yes and no. I mean, like when I started that band, my goal was to combine the best aspects of being in a touring rock band or a touring band with the best aspects of being in a highly virtuosic chamber ensemble. I had all these friends who were in bands who were touring around, and it seemed fun. They were rehearsing every week. They were hanging out with their friends. They were making music together. They were traveling around the world. They were performing for different audiences all the time. They were making records. And on the other side, like on the more, I guess, classical side, there's there's a beauty to that complexity. And I like writing for people who are very good at their instrument. So I just wanted to combine the best of all possible worlds. And I think the decision to call it a band was really intentional. Like I found like when I tell people I'm a composer, it's like their eyes sort of glaze over and they're like, I don't understand what that means. And oh, that's probably weird. And all these barriers go up. But when I say I'm in a band, they're like, cool. And there's an understanding that I'm going to stand in front of them and play music that I wrote. And their ears are wide open, and they're much more open to experimental, unexpected sounds because the paradigm is familiar, the situation is familiar, and they're like, oh yeah, my brother's in a band, and he's in an experimental improv band, and I'm like, they're able to relate to you much easier.
Yeah, it's clear that we think of pop and rock composers different than we do classical. Like, nobody wants to hear anybody other than Billy Joel sing Piano Man. but it's totally normal for a composer of a classical piece to write it and then never play it and hand it off to someone else to interpret.
Hmm.
Do you enjoy performing your own works as much as you do listening to others play them?
Well, it's a tough question. Like, I love performing. I only play piano. So if I were only writing for myself, that would get very old very fast. I will always perform. And I think I need that kind of release in my life. And because there's a certain kind of feedback loop that is complete when you stand in front of people, get nervous, play your stuff, and then it's done. And then and then the audience receives it. And there's a sort of like completing of a cycle that is really beautiful there. That is, I wouldn't say you don't get as just as a composer sitting in the audience or sitting in the wings, but it's a different kind of feeling. And I think I need the release of performing for people as well.
Yeah, that must be a very different experience than sitting in like Carnegie Hall as an orchestra is playing your piece and then coming up on stage.
It's crazy. It's a crazy rush to be out there in front of all these dozens and dozens of people who have just played your music and a huge crowd in a storied building like Carnegie Hall. I mean, it's incredible. Like during the performance, it's a very out of body experience. It's like I like sweat in weird places. Like I get nervous about bowing without falling. Like there really like crazy thoughts will like go through your head. I've never fallen, by the way. It's not like a legit fear. But like, it's just like, oh, I hope this goes well. And you're kind of like willing the orchestra to just keep going and to stay together and to like, get through it and to do it well. But there's nothing you can do. So it's a very strange feeling. And on the other side, there's a total rush with like when I'm playing piano or when I'm playing with my band, but I have a duo with Jennifer Coe, the violinist. And so we perform a duo show a lot. So like when we're performing together, it's just a different kind of rush. It's a different kind of release. And again, you can't really compare the two. Like they're very different feelings. And I feel like I need both in my life.
Right. Your compositions embrace so many different genres of music and you're so comfortable in them. It seems like you don't elevate one genre over another. How do you balance the immediacy of like a pop tune with the complicated nature of some of your compositions?
Tough question. Like, as you say, I've never found the hierarchy in the two, whether or not you're elevating classical music or music by dead people, or whether you're elevating like pop music, or it's just like, it doesn't mean anything, And I think a lot of the ways that we elevate, usually it's classical music, are really just elitist. And one of my goals as a composer is to not play into that. And the music itself is not elitist. The music itself is for everybody. And I think it's frustrating to me when the world sort of makes it seem like it's the music for a few. When people feel like because they don't like something or they don't like a particular opera, that it's because they don't have the education to like that piece, or they don't know enough to really get that piece. And it could be that the piece just sucks. It could be that you don't like it. It could be that it's not your thing, The same way that we talk about movies, like some people love horror movies, some people hate them, and that's totally fine. That's okay. And but I just think it's weird in our talking about it that, that we don't talk about classical music that way. And we don't encourage people to just come in fresh, maybe knowing nothing about the piece or the history or whatever. And you can still have an opinion, and you will, and you should have an opinion about whether or not you like it. Because the thing is I just feel like that's a real barrier for young people to get into the music, because they feel like they need, 3 degrees in music and, a trust fund in order to like access this music. And it's not true.
That's refreshing to hear you say. I have 2 daughters. They're grown now, but when they were younger, my wife and I would take them to the Upper East Side to a ballet class. And in each one of these ballet classes, there was a pianist in the corner playing as these little girls danced. I read that one of your early jobs in Manhattan was being that very pianist for an Upper East Side ballet class.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yes.
What was that experience like?
Oh my God. I mean, so it was, that was the year that I moved to New York, 2006. I had like 7 jobs at the same time. So I was working in a grocery store was one of them. I was accompanying dance classes was another one. I was doing copying work. I was like teaching random classes at Yale where I just graduated. So I was just like all over the place and still had no money. It was this really weird combination of like 7 jobs and still like not making enough to survive. One of them was playing piano, and it was Saturday and Sunday mornings for like baby ballet classes, like Mommy and Me little kid ballet classes, and it was fun. They were really cute, but I was, after like 6 months, I was like, I hate this actually. Like, I can't do this anymore.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Speaking Soundly. If you like what you heard, please tell your friends about it. Spread the word. Be sure to follow, rate us, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. To keep up on future episodes, follow us on Instagram at SpeakingSNDLY and visit our website, artfulnarrativesmedia.com. Tune in next week as we hear another inspiring artist speaking soundly.